What a chaotic night of football. Should we start with the headline? Norwich City are through to the second round of the Carabao Cup or / League Cup, depending on maybe your choice of whether you want to use the cup advertising or not, but that's completely irrelevant. They are through. They've managed to kind of scrape through. It's been a very eventful, quite a roller coaster evening, full of ups and downs. It finished here at Carrow Road, Norwich 2, Birmingham 2. That took it to a penalty shootout. There was no extra time here tonight. Norwich City have managed to win the penalty shootout 4-2 in front of, well, in that goal. I don't think there's a goal there anymore, but there was a goal up there in the Barclay, and that was where the penalties were taken. And we're going to dissect the game kind of as it happened first and foremost. So Dean Smith made 10 changes to his side. Jakob Sorensen, the only survivor from the team that played on Saturday, probably as we were expecting. There were starts for Gabriel Sara, Jonathan Tompkinson, Liam Gibbs, Danel Sinani. I think that was his first competitive start for Norwich City 2.5 years after signing. Trying to think if there was anyone else. Aaron Ramsey made his debut off the bench, but this was a really different Norwich City team, had a different look to it, a different flavour to it from what we've seen in the opening 2 games, and that was understandable. There was no Todd Cantwell, Max Aarons was on the bench, Timu Pukki was on the bench, and you expect rotation in this competition, and that is what Dean Smith went for. And Norwich actually very similarly to how they kind of operated on Saturday, really, from a performance perspective, looks pretty good for the vast majority of this. There's probably a segment and 2 incidents in particular where that just flipped, and ultimately that soft underbelly, that maybe hangover from last season to an extent where they concede a goal, the heads drop, and it feels slightly inevitable that a team's going to get back into the game. Maybe that kind of crept in as well in the second half, but we'll save that. So Norwich City opened the scoring through Danel Sinani in the first minute of added time in the first half. Jordan Hugill did wonderfully well down the right, just really good perseverance, managed to get a cross in. It deflects, loops up, and who should be waiting unmarked in almost the 6-yard box? Danel Sinani, and I spoke to him after the game. And he said it was almost eyes closed and just kind of hope it hits your head. And, it was that motion, try and get it down. It came down, bounced back up. Fortunately for Norwich, nestled past Neil Etheridge and into the net. And that gave them the opening, the lead. They deserved that on the evidence of the first half. They created some good chances before that, but nothing really clear cut again, which is unfortunately a theme that is emerging. That said, they won't need to create anything too clear cut. If Jakob Sorensen produces that level of skill and that strike every week. We saw him do it in pre-season in Marseille. He curled a shot beautifully into the top corner. He started the game as a right back, then got moved to left back when Sam McCallum limped off. And as McCallum was making his way around the pitch, Sinani crosses from the right. It's a deep one. Sorensen controls, and then it's a screamer, absolute screamer. Curls it with his right into the top corner of the net past Neil Etheridge. 2-0. Norwich City looking very good value for that lead, very comfortable. And even though they didn't probably create the clear-cut chances they would have liked, there was still a lot of territory and there was control, and they enjoyed plenty of possession and enjoyed the ball in good areas. They were moving the ball quickly. There were some really nice rotations, some really intelligent overlaps, some really intelligent underlaps, some really intelligent overloads in the centre of the pitch. They were all quite nuanced, but they were doing some good stuff. It just probably, again, once it got to the final third, all felt a little bit stodgy, as it has done in recent weeks. I can't really think of a save they forced Neil Etheridge into. Sinani had a shot that he dragged wide. Gabriel Sara had a shot that he dragged wide. Hugill had a header, but that was offside. So all of these kind of things were in the first half. And as you said, look value. I think everyone inside Carrow Road probably expected Norwich to probably go through the gears a little bit, to see out the game fairly comfortably, to manage it in the second period. They didn't need an extra goal. They were 2-0 up. They were comfortable. They were good value for that. Even if they maybe weren't as clear cut and possessed the cutting edge that perhaps we would associate with them, they'd still done enough. And actually, it was probably akin a little bit to the performance that we saw on Saturday, but with the goals to add to that. And that's probably the difference between Saturday and here. But it was obviously one real bit of luck that he didn't get on Saturday for Hugill's cross, and then one real bit of quality with Sorensen's finish. And it all looks fairly comfortable going into half-time. It feels like the game's heading one way. It feels like Norwich City are going to end up in the draw for the next round. That's, of course, tomorrow evening. And then they're controlling the ball in the middle. Sinani fizzes a ball into Kieran Dow. I think the pass, really, they're sort of less than 10 yards away from each other. The touch is relatively poor from Dow, but didn't have a lot to work with in terms of the pass. Birmingham then counter. Jonathan Lecco, who doesn't score many goals actually ordinarily, is played through, and it's a good finish past Angus Gunn, and that gives Birmingham a lift. It gets them back into the game, and all you have to do in games like this, when teams come to sit in a low block, frustrate. There was actually portions of the first half that Birmingham were playing strikerless, but they did some good things, not necessarily in possession, but certainly out of possession, and you can see why they've probably started the season well. But then it kind of unravels, because I know Hernandez gives away a silly free kick down the right, but actually when he gives that free kick away, Norwich then opt to make 2 subs. When I talk about game management, this is where it feels to me like actually you probably defend the set piece first, then bring the subs on after that, and they didn't. Dean Smith opted to throw them on. Whether that had an impact or not, only he could say, and I'd have to watch it back in terms of how it impacted things structurally, but the free kick came in. Cosgrove goes up with Hanley. I think Cosgrove heads it off the back of Hanley's head. It goes out for a corner. That corner is then floated in. It hits Jonathan Tompkinson, I think, on the shoulder, and that's enough to take it past Angus Gunn and into the net. And suddenly, from a relatively comfortable position, even at 2-1, Norwich were pretty comfortable. They didn't really give Birmingham too many opportunities, and yet they had squandered a 2-goal lead. And that really is the concern, because at this moment in time, we saw it on Saturday, we saw it at Cardiff as well, opponents aren't having to do much to score goals against Norwich City, and that is something that I think Dean Smith will be desperate to address, and will be concerned about probably moving forward. But from a coaching perspective, it's actually very difficult on kind of how you coach those individual errors out of players. I mean, the Onel Hernandez one is just silly. It's a silly free kick to give away. I thought Hernandez was probably pretty bright, although somewhat frustrating as characteristically he is. But yeah, it's difficult. And from there, Norwich had an opportunity. Etheridge cleared a shot. Sonani then clipped the bar. Sarah couldn't follow it up, and Gibbs then ballooned it over. That was it, really, in terms of clear-cut chances. We then went to penalties. I've got the list in front of me, so I don't forget anyone. Kenny McLean stepped up first, dragged his shot wide. All pressure then really on Norwich City. Kenny McLean owes Angus Gunn a pint or so tonight, or a beverage of choice, perhaps. Because he dragged his penalty wide. Cosgrove then stepped up. His penalty was pretty soft. Angus Gunn saved it. Liam Gibbs stepped up. It is one of, I mean, we'll get to an even more confident penalty in a moment, but considering the circumstances, young man, senior debut for Norwich City, 2-step penalty and really composed finish. And there's a reason he was named to go up in second place. That's why he's got that quality. And I thought he was very good tonight. Jordan Graham then goes up. Good penalty. Danel Sonani steps up. Good penalty. Jonathan Lecco steps up. Good save from Angus Gunn. And then we get to Marcelino Nunez, who, and he had a shot from inside his own half, which is always a sign of a player that has a little bit of confidence and a little bit of something different. And it makes you kind of say, oof. I mentioned this in the podcast. Sometimes you watch players and they just have moments where, yeah, I like that. And that shot inside his own half, it was wayward. It wasn't on target, but I liked the thinking and the kind of ingenuity, I suppose, to come up with that, to engineer that in your mind. Most players don't do that. And as he was walking up, I turned to my colleagues and I said, he's going to chip this. And you can ask them. I'll make sure we get clarification on this. But I definitely said he will chip this. He steps up, Panenka. It doesn't quite look like it has enough, but he's managed to sit the goalkeeper down, and it's just managed to have just enough weight on it to carry it over the line. It's an incredible penalty, an incredible moment. And from that point, when that penalty just drops the right side of the line past Neil Etheridge, I think you think, yeah, this is probably Norwich City's night. And that put them in a wonderful position. It was a crucial penalty in the shootout, because that put them 3-1 up. James then comes up and takes a spot kick. He scores. And then it's all pressure on Josh Sargent. And actually the stand that I'm in, the Barclay end as well, all of this stadium was really willing him on, because it's been a difficult time for him at Norwich City. He needs a moment, a spark. It was a really confident, assured penalty to put Norwich into the next round of the competition. And I'm really pleased for Josh Sargent, because actually there are probably few players who need that moment more than him at this point in time. Good penalty. Norwich get through. We all can breathe. We can all lie down and relax. Not quite. A couple more things to speak about. Sam McCallum went down in the first half. I've just seen him actually emerge from the tunnel. He was on crutches and had his foot in a protective boot. These things, not to kind of over dramatise it, because these things are very natural. They're very precautionary after a foot injury for a player to wear a protective boot and to be emerging, and then to be absolutely fine a few days later when it's assessed. It's usually just to kind of manage it initially and managed the initial pain. He was really struggling for a period on the left-hand side, went down a couple of times, and then there was the point where it was up. Obviously, the context of this injury is that Dimi Yanulis suffered an ankle ligament injury on Saturday, very painful, very ugly to kind of see, very hard to watch actually at points that he was receiving treatment because he was in tears. He's out for 8 weeks. Norwich now have an anxious wait for Sam McCallum and where he is. Obviously, the alternative is Jacob Sorensen. I keep saying Jacob. I've been saying Jacob for 2 years. It is apparently Jacob Sorensen now. And we've seen him do that kind of 2 years ago. But as Dean Smith called him, he is a human polyfiller. It's not his natural position. And he started quite slowly tonight, but I felt grew into the contest. Actually, probably looked a bit better when he was on the left back and looked a bit more assured and a little bit more comfortable, which is interesting because he's right-footed. Whether that's because it gives him the chance to go inside and play inwards to the midfielders, I'm not quite sure. That's an easier kind of step than trying to play down the line at points. So maybe that's why. But it looks increasingly like, particularly for Hull, obviously we can't speculate on the nature of Sam McCallum's injury, but it feels like for Hull we're probably going to see Jakob Sorensen there in that particular role. Daniel Sanani I thought was pretty impressive tonight, albeit the pass that sort of went wrong and led to Jonathan Leko's goal was probably a major downer on it for him tonight. But what a kind of story. This was his first competitive start 2.5 years after signing for Norwich City. Scored a goal, registered an assist, did very well. Gabriel Sara made his debut. Thought he looked exactly probably what he is. Needs to get up to speed, but there was some nice pressing. There was a few nice touches. There was a willingness to get beyond the ball in attacking phases of play, which was encouraging because Norwich City don't have too many midfielders who really kind of break a neck to get beyond the ball and get into the box. That was good. Marcelino Nunez, technically when he came on, there's something really exciting about him, and it's stature, it's technical ability, it's a different way of thinking. There's a couple of really clever passes. Not everything he did came off. There was one pass down here that he tried to thread through to Hernandez that he just underhit. But if Norwich can get him in a rhythm and he can adapt quickly, it feels like they've got a very, very exciting footballer there. And I was actually told that when he came over last week, he did some things in training, both on Thursday and Friday, that essentially propelled him into the starting lineup on Saturday. And you only have to look at the penalty that he scored tonight to see the kind of player that Norwich City have on their hands, to have not just the confidence to think I'm going to chip it, but to have the execution. It was almost like a golf wedge off the turf. Executed it perfectly. Got some backspin on the ball that kind of slowed it down, and it was a brilliantly executed penalty, an outlandish penalty from a player who is really exciting, and when he gets into his rhythm, feels like he's going to be very exciting as well. Who else stepped forward? Liam Gibbs I want to mention as well, because I thought he was terrific tonight, and actually, since I've watched Liam Gibbs throughout pre-season, I've seen a lot of him, and kind of every time I watch him, I like him a little bit more as a footballer. He's kind of my type of footballer, someone who wants to get on the ball, but also since he's come to Norwich, he's kind of been moulded into this sort of number 6 a little bit more than he was at Ipswich, where he was a bit more of a sort of 8.5, 10 kind of almost. Norwich have pulled him back. He's got a great range of passing, but also a willingness to get stuck in, and he's quite lean as well, which probably gives this perception that he's not willing to get stuck into tackles. But now, obviously, with the context of maybe Sorensen moving to left back, obviously Isaac Hayden not being quite right yet, it does open up a vacancy in there. And if Gabriel Sara isn't quite at a stage where he can start a football match, that may well present Liam Gibbs with a wonderful opportunity. And it may well now come down to just how much Dean Smith likes him, just how much Dean Smith trusts him in that role in the Championship game. But if you put him alongside Kenny McLean, with Marcelino Nunez ahead of that, that's a very exciting trio for me. Obviously, with Isaac Hayden and Gabriel Sara to come into it. So, all of these things add up to what was a really eventful football match here at Carabao tonight. Norwich City in the second round draw. That's tomorrow. I believe Premier League teams go into that, but not those who are competing into Europe. No doubt we'll be off to Burnley or something. No disrespect to Burnley, but somewhere really far away. It adds an extra game into the calendar. I think at the end of this month, there's a free week. So I'd imagine it will be slotted into the midweek there. We'll, of course, have all of the coverage of that draw and the reaction to it as and when it happens. And just finally, tonight, I thought I'd speak about kind of the performance that Norwich City had, because there's been a lot of talk for a prolonged period of time about structure and identity and stylistics. And actually, you look at what Norwich City are trying to do, and at times their fullbacks are pushed high. And if you kind of maybe pushed your hand over the home dugout, at points you would think you were watching a Daniel Farke team. Not completely if you watch them over the piece, but certainly in possession and what they try and do at times, there are similarities. Not to say that they're carbon copies, because they're not. I think Norwich are more pragmatic. They're more willing to mix it up. There was a willingness to kind of go longer into Jordan Hugill at points. Not necessarily that that's a bad thing. It's just a different way of building up play. But I did feel performance-wise, this was probably a continuation. I don't think they stepped any further forward than they did against Wigan. Certainly in terms of if we're looking at it clearly in a final third perspective, because they didn't create the clear-cut chances. But there was a structure, there was a plan. Daniel Sanani was good at ticking things over. They got players into good areas. They did some nuanced things quite intelligently. They pressed well at points. It wasn't a consistent feature as maybe it was at, say, Cardiff in the opening game. But it feels like a team that's growing and that's evolving. And I think it's in a positive direction. And maybe really the next weeks will tell us. But the concerning aspect is the fact that teams are scoring goals against them far too routinely, often off the back of their errors. And that's something that needs to be addressed. And whether that's a confidence issue and an intangible issue that Dean Smith can kind of get his head around and they can address and tweak and fix that mentality, that remains to be seen, or whether it's a technical and structural point. And really, that's one for Dean Smith to sit down with his analysts and his coaching staff to assess. I'm off to bed. Thank you very much for watching. Pinken.com, of course, the place to go. The Pinken Plus app as well. If you haven't taken out a free trial of that, you can do so. Go on Pinken.com. There's a tab in the top left that says Pinken Plus. Click on that and you can follow all the instructions to get a month's free trial to plenty of exclusive content. Paddy's pointers are on there. Player ratings are on there. We'll have player interviews on there. Chris Sutton's column in the morning. So much. Also video stuff as well to look forward to. We're in a really sort of condensed period of games now, the next kind of 2 weeks or so, which is brilliant really, as we kind of get our teeth stuck into this championship season and this Norwich City team. Thank you very much for watching. I'll leave you and enjoy the rest of your evening. See you soon.